Thank you, Stephen. My name is Burke, and I am an alcoholic. And I've been sober since. Put this right here. I've been sober since April the 6th of 2021, and I'm really, really grateful for that. I'm also grateful you didn't tell any embarrassing stories like you told me that you were going to, so that's good. Thank you for that. Small mercies. And I'm really grateful that I think I've got some friends joining from Zoom from other parts of the country. So thank God for technology. I mean, that's really cool. I was joking with Patrick on my way in. I was like, God, speaking of small mercies, I think it's getting my good side. Like the iPad's over here, so that's good. But yeah, I'm really happy to be here. I love this meeting. I love Sunday Morning Live. I've told my story here before, and I mean, just like the place that we're in is like the most AA place ever, right? Like this is when folks that don't come to Alcoholics Anonymous think about AA, they think about church basements just like this one. And there's no better group to sort of, to share with. And you guys always laugh at jokes even when they're not funny. And I thank you so much for that. And I'm just really happy to be here. It's a privilege. All right. So I'm going to start with what it was like, get to what happened, and talk about what it's like now. So yeah, Stephen talked about we grew up in the same part of the country. I grew up in Northeast Texas, about an hour and a half northeast of here in Dallas. So I grew up in the outskirts of Paris, Texas. So Cunningham, Texas, population 91 is where I grew up. And I grew up about 5 minutes from the poorest per capita county in the state of Texas. So that's just a little bit of like painting the background of like where I grew up. It was very rural, like I said, 91 people. Both sides of my family come from that place too, and I come by this disease honest. There's alcoholism on both sides of my family, and my granddads on both sides were sort of legends where I come from. My granddad on my dad's side comes from like an old Texas family. There's a Burke Burnett, Texas. That's the same dude I'm named after. So like, he was boxing champion in the Air Force. He was, right as rain, straight as an arrow. Very, folks really respected my granddad on that side. On the other side, also legendary, but for all the wrong reasons, probably more notorious, my other granddad was a wife-beaten drunk who gambled away every cent he ever earned, and was not someone that folks were proud to be associated with, and he died before I was born. But yeah, that's kind of the folks I come from. My dad is about as John Wayne as actual John Wayne. He is, when people that aren't from Texas think about Texas, they think about folks like my dad, who's a blue-collar worker. I don't think he's ever drank alcohol in his life, maybe once, I don't know. But he also raised cattle, still raises cattle. And my mom was an educator, was a school principal, was my school principal, which was some fun stories there, but she was, and my mom is really, I talked a little bit about where she comes from and like the type of folks that raised her, and we've had a complicated relationship, especially when I was growing up, but she's really like my hero. My mom was the first person in her family to graduate high school, and she graduated as valedictorian and as a mother of a 1-year-old, because she got married when she was 16, because that's what you do in, Cunningham, Texas in the 60s. And she went on to graduate college, was the first person in her family to graduate college. She's got more degrees than I could rattle off, and she was the first female administrator at Prairie Independent School District. So in her small way, in her small area of the world, she was a real trailblazer and was the first to do a lot of the stuff that she did. So I'm really, really proud to come from the imperfect folks that I come from. So anyway, that's a little background. I said that my dad didn't really ever drink. My mom really didn't ever either. I grew up in a very religious household too. So Pentecostal upbringing. And I'm seeing some nodding, so you guys know about Pentecostals. Not knocking them, but that's, my experience with them is very similar to, there's this great speaker from Dallas that she's got this great one-liner about Pentecostals. She said, I went to the Pentecostal church and I learned 2 things. I learned that God loves me and I'm going to hell. And that is my experience with that church also. I was a very self-aware kid. So before I can remember, I knew that I was very different than the other boys. I remember being 4 or 5, maybe 6 at J.C. Penney's, looking up at like the where we're checking out, buying school clothes, and like there's this other little boy in his Arizona jeans jacket, advertisement. I remember thinking, I want him to be my boyfriend. And that's the Pentecostal church will tell you that's probably not what you're supposed to be thinking. And so I'd heard that, and I'd gotten that message. And so when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous and I was listening to the language that's used here, it talks about defects of character. And it's interesting that language is used, because for so long I thought I had a defect. I thought something was defective about me because of that, right? And I'm so grateful to have learned that that's not the case, and that's awesome. But I felt that for the longest time. And so, again, like I said, that was one of my earliest memories. And so for as long as I can remember, there was this management of image that I knew was essential for my survival, because if folks knew this thing about me, this defect, if they had any inkling of that, then I perhaps would not be loved. I perhaps would not, I would get kicked off the island. I was so worried about that. And so as a little self-aware kid, I did a lot of that management stuff. And as a lot of folks in Alcoholics Anonymous will tell you, I needed a drink long before I ever found one. I was wound pretty tight. My first drink was kind of a non-event. I was like 13, and I drank Jack Daniel's Down Home Punch with this girlfriend of mine whenever we were about 12, maybe 13. I didn't think it tasted great. I didn't get a good buzz. It was just I was trying to do something wild like kids do. Now about a year later, I had that aha moment that folks talk about, where it's like and like found that feeling. I played football. I played all the sports growing up, because that's what you do in the area of the country where I come from. And I was playing football. It was my freshman year. It was the summer before freshman year, and we're doing 2-a-day football practices. And at the end of this long ass football practice day, we go over to my friend Buckethead's house. And because we're in we're in Cunningham, Texas, so there's Buckethead's. We're at Buckethead's place, and there's a hot tub, and it's a hot tub full of football players. So young gay me is just I'm liking what we're doing. We're hanging, we're relaxing in the hot tub. And somebody busts out a joint, and they busted out Purple Passion, this big 2-liter bottle of Purple Passion. And I took a few swigs off that, and I took a few drags off that joint, and all those walls that I had built up and all that wound so tight stuff had sort of come down, and man, I was funny. I felt fucking free. For the first time, I felt free. And that was that feeling that I wanted to chase. I didn't ever want to not feel that way. So my entire freshman year, your parents give you lunch money or whatever. I spent all that lunch money on weed. I developed a really good relationship with my buddy Zach, whose sister owned the biggest bar in town. So anytime that I wasn't at my house, I was drinking beer with Zach, and that's what we did. We lived very close to the Oklahoma border, where you could drive across and almost nobody would card you. So 14-year-old me would just drive on over. I would drive at 14, because again, Paris, Texas. Drive on over and pick up, and I was off to the races. That's how I spent my high school years, was getting buzzed, getting loaded. By the end of my freshman year, I had probably 4, maybe 5 minor in possessions, MIPs. I was getting in trouble right and left. My folks were at their wits' end. And I ended up getting a lot of consequences really quickly. By the end of my sophomore year, I'd gotten in a lot more trouble at school and away from school, trouble with the cops, and I ended up at 16. There's so much that happened. So at 16, I got in so much trouble that I essentially got kicked out of the high school that I was going to, which sucked. I was like, oh man, that's. I didn't realize they were actually, y'all were actually going to follow through with that thing y'all said you were going to do, but they did. So I got kicked out of high school, and this was Oh, let me back up. So I was so drunk the summer before that. I was so drunk that I came out to my parents and I didn't even really mean to. I was driving around with a buddy, and we were like throwing eggs at this senior dude's house because he was picking on my buddy. We're sophomores or whatever. And I come home and I'd stolen the car. My parents are at their wits' end again. They're laying into me, and I said, you know what else? I'm gay. They were, my Pentecostal folks were none too. My dad's in his tighty whities and like leans over on like the arch of the doorway, and my mom just falls back in the chair and she says, "Have you been out fucking boys?" And I said, "I don't fuck boys, I fuck men." And it was that was the next morning I woke up and was like, holy shit. I didn't mean to do that like that. But the cat was out of the bag, and that was while a lot of people come out of the closet and it's like, oh, it was so liberating. It's like maybe right, like maybe, but also there's more than one. I don't know. I was about to say there's more than one sort of closet to come out of, right? Like I felt I was free in that one way, but then it was like all these people know this about me, and my friends started to that became who I was, and I didn't want everything that I knew about being a gay man was stuff that I'd seen in the media. I certainly didn't know any other gay men personally, or anyone to look up to as an example, or certainly anyone to be proud of. And like there was Liberace, there was Rock Hudson, I mean there were a few folks that I knew about, but I didn't want to be like them. So I wanted to the idea of continuing to drink. I all those feelings, like a good alcoholic, I couldn't handle those feelings, but I could handle anger. Anger I could manage, right? And so I became a very angsty kid that just, did a lot of stupid stuff. And a lot of that stupid stuff included drugs and alcohol. And the way that I use drugs and alcohol is in a really, really destructive way. So 16, got kicked out of high school. Immediately thereafter went and tested because 9/11 had just happened. And everyone was so proud of my granddad. There's still this part of me wanted everyone to be proud of me too. So I went and signed up for the Air Force the way that my granddad had. And so I took the ASVAB test, and I scored highly enough on that to be able to do some intelligence stuff. I was so stoked about this new path that I could perhaps go down. Shortly before basic training, I got caught with 1.5 pounds of weed. Coming back from thank God I was coming back from my cocaine dealer's house, so thank God it was just weed. And I'm 16 and I have a dealer, whatever. And that, that's a felony. I could certainly not get an intelligence clearance. All the sign-on bonuses that were there for me were taken away. Ended up not going to the Air Force. Now I don't know, and this is, for anyone that served our country, like, thank you so much. That's I respect and admire that so much. But that was the beginning of a big long war, and like maybe that was my higher power taking care of me. I don't know, I don't know. But I shortly thereafter got even more felonies because I kept behaving the way that angsty teenage alcoholics do, and I ended up going to prison by the time I was 19. Not a lot going on though, man. Like I've told this story before, and I sometimes leave this part out, but the way I actually got to prison was I'd been on probation for this sentence. When I was 18, I'd bought some stereo equipment for my dealer using some other person's checks, because that's what you do. And I'd been caught doing that and already been convicted of these 3 felonies, right? So I'm on probation for that. But I never stopped smoking pot. I never stopped doing drugs. I never stopped drinking. So every time I went in, I was peeing dirty. So they were getting sick of me, right? But I've also got a lot of stuff going on up here. It talks about in the book, there's a lot of us that have grave emotional and mental disorders, and that's true for me, man. That's true. It's intermittently truer at some points than it is at other points, but like that was certainly true for young 19-year-old me. And I think I'd watched Girl Interrupted too many times, and I tried to pull a Winona Ryder, and so I took a bottle of pills and I chased it with a bottle of vodka, and I didn't want to wake up, but I did wake up. I woke up in the hospital, and I was there for like 5 days, and at the end of those 5 days, I'd worked with the social worker to get me connected to a treatment center. I'd probably been to 2 or 3 treatment centers already. I cruised the rehab circuit there for a decade, so that was part of my deal. But as we left, we were gonna be going to court ordered rehab. The officer that was driving the car, I'm in the back of a police car, got a call. We turned around. They took me to county jail. They had revoked my probation, and I ended up going to. I spent the next 15 months in TDCJ, and so as someone who had just tried to end my life, I am a 19-year-old who then gets sent to prison. It was like some part of me shut down. Depressed doesn't even begin to touch what I felt. I just felt empty on the inside. And the whole time I was in there, I swore I was going to live a better life whenever I got out. Let me look at time. I swore I was going to live a better life when I got out. My folks, thank God for my folks. They sent me money the whole time I was in there, thankfully. They sent me... gay kid going to prison. They sent me Vanity Fair, Rolling Stone, sent me a lot of good reading material. They sent me the Dallas Morning News also, and so I don't know if y'all remember. I don't know if it's still there, but like the real estate, the Village was just being built, like the West Village, and so like I would cut out these like real estate ads and dream of this life I was gonna have when I got out. I was not even gonna have coffee, y'all. I was just gonna drink green tea. I was gonna meditate. I was gonna do a lot of yoga. I was gonna go back to school. Who knows? The sky's the limit. And all these big, great, and wonderful ideas. Grandiosity is also one of those telltale symptoms of alcoholism that I certainly have. And so I got out, and I had all the best intentions. Within a month, I had started drinking again, and within 3 months, I was doing a lot of other stuff that I shouldn't have been doing again. Alcoholism is a big part. Alcohol is a big part of my story, but the word alcoholism encompasses a lot more than just alcohol for me. I had a needle in my arm by the time I was 16. I was doctor shopping, as a teenager. There was anything you had that would get me out of the present moment sounded real good to me. And so that's what I was addicted to. And so I was doing all of that stuff again at 21, newly out of prison. 21 to about 27 was just a whole bunch more of the same. It was a whole bunch of that. It was a whole bunch of me getting to the point to where I wanted to die, and then retreating to places like rehabs or counseling or whatever to come up for air, to try again. I came to places like Alcoholics Anonymous. I'd put my joint out in the car and walk on in here. I did that for a lot of years, and so when I see folks do that these days, I welcome them and offer them. We got donuts if you got munchies. This is not, and just like church ought to be, like, this is not a home for the healed. This is a welcome. This is a landing place for the broken. So that's the most important folks in this room right now are the folks that are struggling and just coming back in. And so yeah, I'm really grateful that folks showed me a lot of grace when I came in here a mess. But yeah. Till 27 is a whole bunch more of that, wash, rinse, repeat, me doing the do. At 26, I got this, I was apt to get in bar fights. I was not an alcoholic in his cups is an unlovely creature, and I certainly was. And I didn't like, I just had a big chip on my shoulder, especially straight dudes, like, what are you looking at? Is how I got whenever I'd get drunk, like, what are you looking at? Because I had a whole bunch of stuff going on with like not feeling man enough for to live up to my dad and all this stuff. We all got our own fucked up childhood shit, whatever. One night I had broken up a fight when I was 26 between these guys, a group of guys, and this buddy of mine who did not hold his liquor well and was about to get his ass whooped. So I stopped them. Hey man, he obviously he can't even walk. Y'all leave him alone. After those guys figured out that they had essentially gotten punked out by a gay dude, they didn't like that too much, and that group of guys beat me up pretty bad. I got stabbed in the back. I got third-degree burns. It was a pretty bad deal, and they're hurling every gay slur in the book the whole time they're doing that, and it was a bad deal. That was when I was 26 in 2011, and those dudes ended up getting hate crime charges. it turned into a big deal in my hometown. I wanted to crawl in a hole and die. I spent almost the next year smacked out on methadone. When I wasn't on methadone, I was on actual meth. When I wasn't on that, I was drinking anything I could get my hands on. I did not want to be present. When I woke up, I was reaching for something to smoke, something to hit, something to drink, something. But when that year anniversary of that event rolled around, I something in me just did not want to be drunk again. That sounded so depressing. Also, I'm pretty vain. You guys heard me talk about, like, does my jawline look good on this side? At 26, like during that awful time, I remember looking up. I was staying at a drag queen's house. Had been up for a few nights. Finally got to bed, and when I woke up, I looked. I'm like washing my face, and I'm like, hold on, am I balding? Hold on. And like the very idea was like, this is not cute. This isn't cute, period. But like, you can't be bald and doing this shit. Like, this is unacceptable. We got to do something about this. So between that and not wanting to be, messed up on the year anniversary of that really traumatic event, I was like, I'm at least gonna go check myself in somewhere. Well, I'd exhausted all the good insurance, so I wasn't going any places that had like seaweed wraps and, equine therapy. I ended up going to the state-run facility over here, Homeward Bound, and it was, exactly what I needed. Not because there was any counselor that told me something that I'd never heard before, not because, the good Lord came and a white light experience happened, in my dorm. It was just I was finally willing to listen to what these folks had been telling me all along. Go to meetings, try what those folks are telling you, listen to somebody who's been where you've been, all that stuff, right? And so I ended up getting, like a good alcoholic, I didn't stay the full time. I stayed 2 weeks, and as soon as I could get into an Oxford house, I got into one. Thank God I got into the one that I did. I found a sponsor. Thank God I found a sponsor that I did. I found Lambda Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. I found you guys here. I found Crystal Meth Anonymous down the road. And it was, it changed my life. It really changed my life. One of the first meetings I went to, one of the people was like, the dude that was chairing was wearing like a salmon pink polo sweater vest, and I was like, oh, you people do not, y'all didn't drink and use the way I did. Like, turns out they did, but I had to really get over myself. I had to really get over the feelings of feeling other than, looking for the differences, and I think I was honestly just beat down enough. Coming to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous really desperate is a perfect way to show up. That gift of desperation is an absolute gift, and the being so tired that I'm not going to listen to my own bullshit that I've been listening to. Harvey, who I just love, who's like family to me, has this great saying that like, my behavior finally got so bad that even I started to notice it. And that's my story. I got sick of my own shit enough to listen to what you guys had to say. And folks talk about slow sobriety. I didn't have that. I had fast sobriety. It went fast. Like, I mean, within I did my steps within a month. I got a great job, waiting to, I also got fired from a job at a bowling alley that first year of sobriety, but whatever. I got a great job waiting tables. I ended up getting a really wonderful job that I parlayed into a career that I've still got that first year of sobriety, and I got sober in 2012, but then it was in 2013 that I met those folks that helped me launch my career. I met a beautiful guy in AA. He was 60 days sober. I was 30 days sober. It was love at first sight. And we ended up getting married soon thereafter. I mean, everything started happening really fast. Folks, caution against doing what I did with the relationship thing. And for years, because that relationship worked until it didn't, for years I would say, well, I mean, that's not my story. So, I mean, I'll now say it's probably wise to heed that advice. That first year is not about finding the one. It's not about finding him. But at any rate, life got really, really good, really, really fast. I started living these principles that you guys had taught me. There was a lot of stuff. There was a lot of ninth step stuff for me. There was a lot of amends that I couldn't go to the people and make amends to. For years, for that straight decade, I did these scams on restaurants where I would like get free food. Like there's any number of ways that you could do that. And I'm like, how do I make how do you even quantify like how much money I stole from those folks? So I worked with my sponsor. Like my living amends now is I never get to send anything back. I could have ordered the steak and they could send me ramen noodles. I'm not sending it back. I don't complain about anything. I tip fat, and that's how I engage with service staff. Like I don't complain about anything, and so that's a living amends that I do. I had all this stuff with my folks that I got to make amends with them, and in the same way it like made me able to sort of forgive them for all these perceived slights too. So I just had this beautiful experience with the steps. I was sponsoring folks. I was taking meetings to treatment centers and to jails, and like I was living the life that I always wanted to live. I was squarely in line with my values for the longest time. Ended up starting a beautiful family with that beautiful man that I talked about. We ended up getting married. By the time I was 2 years sober, I was a dad. And I'll tell you, one of the stories with Stephen, like there's so many people in this room that helped make that possible. Like I didn't go through all the litany of stuff, but like I have a long rap sheet. If the state of Texas is looking at me applying to become an adoptive father, immediate was like, hell no. Are you kidding me? Like I had assault on police officers, 4 of them. I had all these forgery of financial instrument charges. I've got petty theft. I've got petty assault. I do not, on paper, I'm not checking out like Father of the Year, right? Like when I went to start that process, I was immediately denied, and my attorney friend that was helping was like, you know what? Let's just go through the motions. Let's appeal. With perhaps in 5 years we gotta start somewhere. Perhaps in 5 years, they'll change their mind. I had 26 letters, beautiful, beautiful letters from folks in Alcoholics Anonymous that I was able to submit to the state of Texas, and my attorney had never seen them actually grant an appeal, and they let me adopt. And so I was able to start a family. 5 months after my first son was born, the adoption worker was like, hey, so there's this girl that like wants a family. She's like describing you guys like somebody with a dog and travels and a gay couple. I don't know why she wants a gay couple, like all this stuff. And I met Cody's birth mom, my middle son's birth mom. A couple of years later, Cody's birth mom comes to my ex-husband and myself and was like, you know what? I loved helping start a family. Like, I would love to be a surrogate, so you guys have dibs if like that's what you want to do. And this beautiful relationship we had with Cody's birth mom she was the surrogate for my baby girl. So I've got 3 beautiful children because of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm able to like be the dad that I want to be because of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's if I haven't said it before, I want to say it right now. Every good thing in my life is because of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'll tell you, man, I had the life that I always wanted. I joke, I was like, it was Facebook gold, y'all. It was so good. It was so good. It's everything I ever wanted. It was picture perfect in so many ways. And then life happens sometimes. There were a few things that happened. So this is just one thing that I'll start in 2018. Something happened that I was able to successfully navigate using the principles of the program, and I'm so grateful for it. My oldest son was not progressing sort of the way that we thought he should have. You read all the parenting books and you see all the milestones, and like things weren't hitting in the ways that we thought they probably should have. We ended up seeing a couple of specialists, and my oldest son was diagnosed with autism. And I was so scared. And over the course of the next year, we were able to throw every kind of therapy you can imagine at him. Occupational therapy, whatever. We're getting therapy for us. We're doing all the stuff. And like my oldest son just finished his baseball season and got the game ball, and he's like he's killing it. Whenever he graduated kindergarten last year, he got like 9 awards, like the math award, the storyteller award, the detective award. Like this kid's rocking and rolling, and like that's that's his story, not mine. Like he's the little badass kid that's doing all that, but like I've been able to be the kind of dad that I want to be because of Alcoholics Anonymous. So that happened. That was really scary in 2018. In 2019, very abruptly, I figured out that there was trouble in paradise in my marriage. And it was shocking to me, and it was, there was a lot of pain around that. And like I said, I can't handle pain. I can handle anger. And so it very quickly morphed into anger. And it was not just pain, it's like anguish. I watched this Brene Brown special recently. She talked about anguish. I was like, it was that one. That's the word. That's the word. Shock and abject pain. That's the word. I was experiencing a lot of anguish, and it morphed very quickly into resentment. And I'll tell you, by the end of 2019, my brother also died, and at the end of 2019, he passed away from this disease. Thankfully, I was able to be there for my parents and be there for his surviving family because of Alcoholics Anonymous. But like I said, I'm doing all the things. Right? I'm raising 3 kids. I've got the big career, big, beautiful career that I'm grateful for. I've got, a whole bunch of stuff going on that I need to be there for. And so I'm showing up, taking meetings to jails, sponsoring, coming to these meetings. But I'm crumbling on the inside. And I'll tell you what I was not doing. I was not doing any forgiveness work. I was not doing any sick man's prayer work. I was stewing in resentment. And it talks about it in the book that you can't do that for very long I can't do that very long without drinking. And that was the truth for me. I ended up drinking. Because of my deal, I ended up going to a professional to ask for some help. And when I did, I turned it on like I do. You put me in front of a doctor and it's showtime, baby. It is showtime. And I walked out of there with Adderall and Valium because I needed a little support. And within 3 months, I was abusing those like I knew I would. Like there was no question in the beginning that I would. I was abusing those, and then it quickly progressed to, some folks, I'll say this, I hear a lot of things that don't always ring true to me in Alcoholics Anonymous. And like some people say, our disease is out there and it's doing push-ups, and I know if I were to drink right now, I'd be homeless under a bridge within a week. Like, that's not my experience. That may be somebody else's experience, and there's a little bit of truth to my disease is out there doing push-ups, but like, I kept my job. I didn't lose anything tangible or material whenever I was drinking that time, but I wanted to die. It was as bad, especially like being a dad. Like, I mean, I'll tell you what I was doing. I would get a bottle of wine, drink it on the way to Paris, Texas, to pick up whatever pills I had, ordered through like the trailer park connections I had down there. Drink another bottle of wine on my way back. And like I would do that 2 or 3 times a week, and I did that for almost a year, and it was, and somehow my career kept growing. I kept getting promotions. It was the pandemic happened. That was lovely. So I'm taking conference calls from home with the video off, putting on mute, getting a big rip of a bong, and then going back on, and all of that with a head full of AA. And it was no fun at all. There was no party. There was nothing to enjoy about it. I just wanted to check out. I'm really, really grateful that I had that head full of AA. I'm really, really grateful that that Zoom meetings happened. God, at the beginning of the pandemic, I cussed out so many people. I was struggling. I just relapsed. The idea of closing the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous to me sounded crazy. It sounded crazy to me. I had so many strong opinions about that, and the fact that we did was just, I had a lot of opinions I was eager to share with y'all about how we should have been doing things differently. In true, like my God has a really funny sense of humor and likes to humble me. Now one of my home groups is a Zoom group, and there's folks I think that have joined today from that Zoom group that I'm really, really grateful for. And I was able to somehow, some way, stay alive long enough for the message to ring true again, and for me to come back. And I'll tell you, for me, it took me 2 other trips to rehab because I just can't stop on my own. I went to rehab at the end of 2020. I went again. I had to go again at the beginning of 21 because I just can't stop on my own. And it was humbling, and going back through the steps showed me a lot about. I think it is slow sobriety this time. Like I'm going back through the steps. I did them again very quickly, but I had so much to make amends for. I had to make amends. My ex-husband, he certainly wasn't perfect in our marriage, but I'll tell you, he's been about as pitch perfect since we've divorced. He has shown me so much grace when I have not been so eager to show him grace. And that's because of Alcoholics Anonymous. Like, he's a great because he's also in this program, he's a great co-parent because of Alcoholics Anonymous. You guys instilled principles in him that makes my life better. And so I'm really grateful for that. And oddly enough, he was a good example of how to be gracious. And I'm really grateful for that. Having come back, all of the practical things, because it's an inside job, right? Like, I can't go to enough meetings. People say meeting makers make it. Maybe that's true for somebody else, but like, again, I relapsed going to a bunch of meetings a week, taking a bunch of meetings to treatment centers. Meeting makers don't make it. This stuff is an inside job, and that's my truth. I have to do all of that practical stuff that it talks about in the book daily. And like, what I know is I have to do it every day because it's been humbling. Like, I can be really good 5 days out of the week, and then my sixth day, I'm sending hate texts. I'm doing all the stuff that I don't want to do. I am not behaving like a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And then I have to do that 10-step amends and make amends for it, and I hate that. But I do know that when I wake up and I do the On Awakening stuff, I ask God to help relieve me of self-pity. Doing that 4th and 5th, I know that is my default mode is self-pity, like to the nth degree, anger, all of that stuff. When I'm not on the beam, everybody in the world is a fucking idiot or an asshole. That's just how I experience the world, and that's not true. The truth is, I'm the common denominator in all of that. So, the bad news is the problem is in me. The good news is the solution is in me. And so, those tools that I've known for years, I'm able to apply today. I work through, and this is just something that I've done that works for me. It's not necessarily in the big book, but like when I'm doing a nightly review or when I'm doing any kind of 4th or 5th step, in looking at how things affect me, or looking in my part, the 7 deadly sins and thinking about it through that lens is really helpful. Which of those am I experiencing today? Pride is always up there. This little season of life has been a lot of sloth and lust, and I'm working through that, thankfully. Right? Like I just exited a divorce. I recommend a hoe phase for anybody going through that. I think that is smart, but I think that's got to be short-lived. So I'm exiting out of that. I've got 3 young kids, so like there's a mess always, right? And like I've got a career that I do. I help a lot of people because that's especially with that lust stuff, especially when it's like getting to the page 69 stuff. It's like it talks about, I pray for a safe and sound sex ideal, and anytime that I pray that God helps me grow into that. But anytime that I'm having any trouble with that or any other area of my life, when nothing else works, help another alcoholic, and that has been clutch for me. Nothing else so much ensures my sobriety today than reaching out to you. But yeah, sloth is, I'm one of the busiest people I know. Everybody thinks they're busy, but like try me. I guarantee you, I'm as busy as you are, if not more. Like, I am one of the busiest people I know, but there are things that I put on the back burner, like paying the gas bill or cleaning up the garage or doing this or doing that. And like, that shit adds up. And so I get to look at that today and, work through all that. Being a single dad and getting sober is tough. Being anybody and getting sober during the pandemic is tough. And so I have to remember, I deal with a lot of fear, which is not necessarily one of those 7 deadly sins, but like the way I've worked through the steps for me is like, that is a defect for me. That is me, that is self-reliance when I ought to be relying on God. And like, I work through a lot of fear. And one of the biggest way, it talks about in the book, like ask God to remove it and immediately I begin to outgrow it. And that's my truth. But one of the biggest ways that I combat fear today is I think, like the fact that I am sober is a fucking miracle. The fact that I am in the place that I'm in life and breathing today is a fucking miracle. And so, if my God can do that, he can do anything. Like any of these little things that I'm worried about, God's got it. And so the zone that I'm in, I think it's about time for me to wrap up, but I'll say this, my go-to sort of, principles that I'm trying to live by today are letting God be big, like God constantly getting bigger and me constantly getting smaller. It talks about in the big book about being, the story of the actor who's constantly trying to run the show. As someone who I didn't have anything before I came to AA, so I was a pretty easy-go-lucky dude. I was a cool dude back, when I was like 27 when I came in here, because I didn't have anything. Like life, it was easy to just sort of, I'm sleeping on your couch, whatever. Like I'm not in control of shit. I'm not controlling. Over the course of being sober, I've built up this idea that I'm in the driver's seat, which is funny because that's like everything I've got is because I've finally let God be in the driver's seat. But it's this weird thing, right? Like where I want to take the reins back. And so it's giving that over to God, remembering that I'm not God. It's a whole bunch of third step stuff. And that's what keeps me sober. And I constantly, like, I guess it's the 11th step of letting God get bigger and me get smaller, and then a whole bunch of 12-step stuff. I'm really, really grateful. It's a we program. I'm really, really grateful that, a lot of the stuff that I've shared with you guys today and folks have nodded along with, normal people aren't nodding along if I were to try and share this stuff. So I'm really grateful that there's a community of folks that get it. Thank you guys for my life. Thanks.